This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
We're talking with retired Detective Fil Waters and behavior analyst and expert Susan Constantine today. Trial going on this week for the Parkland resource officer in regards to his lack of entering the school when the school was being shot up and children were dying. I want to get your reaction first, Susan. We've seen a lot of videos of this man and his, seemingly very authentic, very remorseful self, looking at what happened and what didn't happen as well. When you see the conversations and interviews that he's given, what do you see from a body language standpoint?
Well, he clearly turned around and ran the opposite direction. So the question is, where was he going? He didn't know where the shots were coming from. He was not inside the building. He didn't go inside the building. I think it's, it's one of these cases where we don't have enough information. And I think that what happened here is just like anyone that's never been involved in a terrorist attack, is that adrenaline rush that runs through you where you're in that fight or flight response. And sometimes you don't respond the way you think you should. But in my opinion, when I was watching his body language, when he was walking up to the door, his body was angled as if it was, and then it did turn away from the door. And as he ran down that corridor and then out. So clearly he was not going in the direction of the fire. He was going away.
Mm-hmm. There's been arguments made because he said, well, I thought it might be outside. His story has always been a little bit cloudy as far as what he was thinking at what time. In terms of him regretting his decision, I've seen him cry on camera. He seems very emotional many times. Obviously, I would think genuinely he probably is. What's your take on that sort of angle of his story that he's been telling?
Yes. So that's a good point, because that's one of the areas that I was looking at. So I was trying to find his baseline when he was not talking about that specific moment. Yep. But when he was asked more normative questions, and then when he was asked more probative, was there a change in his demeanor? Yes, he did show some sadness in his chin, which is called chin dimpling. So that is a genuine expression of sadness. Although, to contradict that, I didn't see these horizontal lines, which are stressors that you most normally see when somebody is really regretful. Usually when they're regretful, you see them raise their eyebrows, which will call the horizontal lines. And for example, when you look at the sheriff, when he is speaking, look at his facial expressions compared to his. Completely different. So I think, hindsight is 20/20. I think afterwards, I think he would have done things a lot differently.
Sure.
But, I have two friends who were two of the Pulse Night survivors that luckily got out of there through a blessing. One was shot 7 times and the other one was trampled on. And you never really know what you're going to do until you're actually there. Sure. So, my friend Angel got shot 6 times and he was, passed out and saw all of his friends around him that died. It was a horrible, horrific thing because, 49 people died in that one.
Sure. Phil, from a law enforcement standpoint, what's your take on all this?
I think the fact this deputy's been charged with anything is atrocious.
Okay. How so?
Well, first of all, looking at video clips, we don't have any understanding. This stuff didn't happen in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And I have been involved in shootings, and I can tell you that being in a structure like that has large hallways, the acoustics, you don't have an understanding of where sounds are coming from, and gunshots going off in particular. I have been a firearms instructor in the Marine Corps and in law enforcement. I have been on numerous ranges. I've been involved in officer-involved shootings. And I can tell you that there are times when you have no idea where the shots are coming from. Mm-hmm. So and look, all this stuff with this deputy happens a year later mm-hmm. in terms of charging him. Of course, he retired. He was called the coward of Broward. I tell you what, I think the way people respond, even the sheriff at the time, the elected sheriff got up there and vilified this deputy mm-hmm. when he should have been supporting him in the situation that he was in. And I believe that sheriff was removed from office by Governor DeSantis, if I'm not mistaken. So, look, we're looking at this thing years later, and this man's reputation has been completely destroyed. And people sitting around looking at videos of partial videos of the things that he was doing at the time that's captured on video and trying to come up with a big conclusion that this guy didn't run toward the gunfire, didn't do this, didn't do that. Look, you can't prove a negative. And I just, my heart goes out to the guy, because now he's not only got to live with the fact that he didn't go in the direction, not necessarily because he was a coward, but because he was sitting in that echo chamber, not knowing where things were coming from. His explanation now is that the gunshots he thought were coming from outside. Yeah, that's why he went outside.
But it seemed many other people did realize that they were inside, and he just stood still. And that I think is the question.
These things don't happen, like I said, they don't happen in a vacuum.
Sure.
These things are happening in real time, and they're happening in a matter of seconds. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, these people that want to, vilify this deputy, mm-hmm. I think they're disgusting. And I don't, trying to, looking at what he's responding to now, I think the guy, I'm surprised, and I'm hopeful that, number one, I hope he's acquitted. This charging him mm-hmm. with child abuse and charging him with the deaths of 10 of that's just disgusting to me. Mm-hmm. He didn't cause that.
No,
and
no.
He's not responsible for what the outcome was. And so to charge him, I'm sorry. I just look, if he had this to all do over again, and to use the term that Susan just used, and have the hindsight advantage, mm-hmm. well, I'm sure he would have made a different decision. But that's not real life.
Sure.
And I just I tell you what, I'm just astounded, and I think it's a dangerous road to go down when we start we're seeing it all the time now. We're seeing police officers charged for making decisions mm-hmm. in a split second that are going to be life-altering for not only the officer or the deputy involved, but for the person that's involved on the other side.
Sure.
And look, police officers are not robots. They're not AI. They're not out here looking at stuff and just making the right decisions at that moment in time because they have all the information. They're making decisions based on what they see in front of them at that moment. And I've worked a lot of officer-involved shootings, and I will get the officer and I will sit them down and I will take their statement. And when they say to me something like the overriding comment is always, I was in fear of my life. Well, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. You need to explain to me what you saw. What did the other person do that caused you to take the action you took? And I mean, describe it in detail.
Yeah.
And that's how we get to the truth about what happens in those incidents. So this thing here, they've taken the evidence, the direction they want it to go, to prosecute this deputy. And I think it's an abuse of the system. I think it is atrocious. And I'm just praying that this deputy, at somewhere along the line, because of the crap that's put on him, doesn't end up eating his own gun.
This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers Podcast. This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
You want to weigh in on anything that we talk about here on the program, you can do that. 8885-KILLER is our phone number, 888-554-5537. We'd love to hear your opinion on any of these stories. I'm Tony Brueski. Stay with us.